Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, on all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed. And when you go to sleep at night.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'a sunnatuhu ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic chat show here on Huda TV, a time to please Allah. And I'm your host Ismail Bullock. Probably haven't seen me for 2 or 3 weeks, but I'm back and I'm here in the flesh. And today we have a surprise guest, probably, I'm assuming, as far as I'm aware, his first time on Huda TV. And it is Brother Abu Mus'ab Wajdi Akari. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So am I correct? Is it your first time on Huda TV?
In this manner, yes.
Okay.
At some point in time, back at the Jeddah Dawah Center, they were filming some sort of documentary about the da'wah to the non-Muslims. So I appeared maybe in a few videos, like short snippets then. But as a guest or as a speaker like that, yeah, I believe that's the first time.
And obviously, you know, you're here in Dubai on work-related matters.
Yes, sir.
And I managed to get hold of you and got you in here. So hence, you know, the attire you're wearing today.
Casual.
Not in your normal thobe, of course.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So obviously, the show, we talk about lots of different topics, and there was a particular topic that you felt you wanted to discuss today, which was misconceptions that people have in Islam around the subject of women.
Yes, sir.
And we've had some shows in the past where we've kind of touched upon a bit of this and a bit of that, but we haven't had something that I can remember. Mashallah, the show's been going for quite some time now, that was specifically on only misconceptions on women.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, you can't help but see the media and the campaign they've been having against women for some time. And it continues to get worse as time goes by. And of course, the image of Islam is being tarnished often by certain acts, by certain individuals. And then the one who sometimes suffers the most, I see, are the women, because they are the biggest representation of Islam in their appearance. Meaning a Muslim male, if he has a beard, you know, that usually is a point or a point of identification. But then again, the beard has become a trend now among everybody. You know, the beard is no longer exclusive to the Muslims. You know, basketball players, you know, actors, different people, that the beard has become a trend. And so even now, if you see someone with a beard, you can still now wonder whether he's a Muslim or not. What you never have second doubts about is if you see a woman with a hijab, because you can differentiate a nun, but you can't mistake a sister with the hijab. So when Islam is put in the spotlight in a negative way, the one who gets the most exposure or the most easily identified as a Muslim are the sisters who are wearing hijab. And so that even makes it more difficult for them to wear the hijab, and we ask Allah to reward them with goodness for their perseverance and patience. And it also makes them the subject of discrimination, sexism, and so on and so forth, where they see her as an oppressed creature of God, you know, that the religion of Islam has put shackles on and she's unable to free herself from, you know, covering herself and so on and so forth.
Right. That also reminds me, I mean, we see after certain events that take place in the world, supposedly in the name of Islam, which are, the way they're done, are un-Islamic and against Islam, we always find that the women, being the weaker sex, you know, generally speaking, I mean, we're talking about physically, of course, and like you said, being so recognizable, because you may find the average Muslim who prays 5 times a day, but he doesn't have a beard, so he's not, you don't know most of the time, is he a Hindu, is he a Muslim, is he a Christian, you don't know.
Right.
But the Muslim woman, even if she's wearing fashionable clothes, but she's got a headscarf of some kind on,
Right.
she's still recognizable. And we always hear these stories of those who are getting attacked, abused, sometimes beaten, pushed
Right,
over,
right.
whatever it may be, happen to be the, always pretty much, as we know, a lot of people who do that kind of stuff are cowards, so they always pick on the women who, the identifiable Muslim women.
Yeah, true. And so, we have to be there for the defense of our, sisters. And we have to clear these misconceptions. There's basically two sides of the tale, or two objectives behind discussing something like this. First, we want to reinforce the sister's position and make her feel good about herself, not to give in or be affected by the pressure that is being placed on her. And secondly, our obligation towards the non-Muslims is that they understand why a Muslim sister is behaving this way, and they should also become more familiar with some historical facts. The irony in all of this is the human being's unawareness of history, and due to that, they pass so many judgments and they make too many assumptions. But we know from historical studies that up until the 1870s, women didn't really have many rights. In fact, they didn't have the right to own a property. Women their last name upon marriage must be changed. This is in the Western law. It has to be changed until now to her husband's last name.
And it's funny, I was reading that the reason behind this is it goes back to ancient Greece.
Yes.
Where the men were only allowed when they got married, should I say, they would take the woman would take the man's name as a statement to show that she is the property of this man.
Yes.
So it literally, just like, you remember Malcolm X, the whole reason he put his name was X, because he said, I have this Western surname from my slave master.
Right.
It was very similar, that he became her master, almost like a slave or property.
Yes.
So she had to take his name. So when she's she's the property of such and such. She belongs to him, like she's no longer really, she's not equal to him.
Which is wild. I mean, if you think about it, and until such recent times, for the ancient civilizations and up until recent dates, feeling this way. Actually, this was not only in Greece. This was in the Roman civilization. They had a similar approach and similar understanding. The woman was a property. She had no right to do technically anything. From the time she married her husband, then she became a property of his, at his disposal. Even her intellectual rights were deprived. That was in Greek law, that was in, even from some certain religious, backgrounds and religious input on this, you will find the same thing in old ancient Christianity before the modernization of Christianity, that, Eve was looked at the temptress who had, was responsible for the fall of Adam, and women were treated as being the daughters of Eve, equally responsible for the fall of Adam. So that the women were the guilty party in this, and the failure of human beings in their own words. So from various civilizations, let's not go far, Oxford and Harvard University, up until 1964, only in 1964 they allowed equal education for men and women. That wasn't the case before. And then we say, okay, from an Islamic perspective, we have to go back 1400 years ago.
And you also remind me of when you mentioned the Adam and Eve, and that the woman, really she is the one who started the whole sin. You find that even going back 100, 200 years, that many of the top, clerics or the clergy from most Christian denominations,
Yes.
they believed they would have statements written that women are evil, they are evil creatures,
Yes.
they are this, they are that. They'd even go as far as to mention about their monthly cycle, that they are disgusting, dirty. And they would write this, and this was their religious belief, and it was the common belief that women, aren't really, they're kind of almost animals in a sense.
Right.
And there's even talk of a debate that went maybe about 300 years ago or so, which you can search for it on Google, and there may be some dispute on whether or not it really is correct, but there's also a lot of evidence for it, that there was a debate where the clergy came to the conclusion that women weren't human. They were either some kind of evil spirit, or they're literally a demon.
Right.
But they weren't able to agree that the woman was even a human.
Now, ironically, I've searched up this particular topic, and from what I remember, there are many supporting evidences about the fact that it took place, and there's statements that are attributed to certain Christian scholars and theologians about that expression.
That's why I mentioned that
whether
first.
she had a soul or not. The discussion was whether she had a soul or not. And then they finally, agreed that she had a soul, which is just wild. Because from an Islamic perspective, we see a completely different image being drawn. Sufficient to begin with the fact that you open up the book of Allah, the revealed scripture, which Allah has promised never to be changed or altered. And then you find that the first chapter is Al-Fatiha, and then Baqarah, Al-Imran, and you eventually come to Surah An-Nisa. And women, the name of the chapter is women. Maryam is the first time a woman is named in the Quran explicitly. No other woman was mentioned in the Quran by name. So these things were highlighted, and then within the actual ayat, I mean, the title of the chapter is one thing, but that's not really the biggest deal. The big deal is in the content. What types of rights were women given in Islam? What are as a mother, for example, we learn from the Prophet ﷺ something that you will not find anybody on earth teaching nowadays. I challenge someone to say what the Prophet ﷺ said in regards to mothers. When a man came to him and asked, "O Messenger of Allah, who has the most right of my good companionship?" You would think your colleague at work, your friend from school, somebody from amongst your close friends. And Prophet ﷺ told them, your mother. Fine, the first answer is your mother, the next answer should be somebody else. He said, then who? He said, then your mother. He said, then who? He said, then your mother 3 times. He said, then who? He said, then your father. Then Allah says in the Quran, in regards to the rights of parents, that وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ إِلَيَّ الْمَصِيرُ. And then Allah Azza wa Jal enjoined upon human being dutiful to the parents. His mother bore him in hardship and weakness, over hardship and weakness, and then his weaning is in 2 years. So that be kind to your parents. To me is the return. So the mother in Islam has a status that is unprecedented. Without her being pleased with the child brings about Allah's pleasure. Her displeasure with the child brings about Allah's displeasure. So much so that there are references to the effect that Jannah is under the feet of the mother in that concept, whether that particular wording is authentic or not. But you're saying that your admission to paradise, which is a human's ultimate goal, is dependent upon how good your relationship is with your mother. Where do you find that? Versus ignoring the mother all year, then on Mother's Day, people buy some, gift of whatever value. And then they feel that they have fulfilled their obligations towards their mother by merely giving her a gift on a day which Allah did not reveal. While in Islam, every day, you're supposed to do your utmost. Not only be dutiful, not only avoid being undutiful, no, you have to go to the extreme in trying to make sure that your parents are happy, specifically the mother. And then if we were to look at the woman as a wife, then Allah Azza wa Jal also gave the woman rights which were not known before. One of which is that she has the right, first of all, her approval in marriage and disapproval is taken into consideration, and it's what makes the marriage valid or invalid. If she's off age, she cannot just get married. They cannot just give her a marriage without her consent. In previous civilizations, that wasn't the case. She would be given a marriage, and her opinion, and among the Greeks and the atheists, it was irrelevant. It was irrelevant what she had to say about it. This is not the case in Islam. Then as a wife, Allah said, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَهُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ. They are clothing for you, and you are clothing for them. And عَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Treat them with what is known to be good, and that they have a right over you, equal to the right you have over them. And Allah gave the man a degree, which is what our sisters need to understand. This is just the way Allah had made the organization of this world. Like in every job, every company, there has to be someone in charge. If everybody was in charge, no decisions will be made, and no business can prosper. So someone has to call the shots, as they say, because this the way it works. And in a family, this is the way it works. If the father has an opinion equal to that of the wife, for example, he wants to send his son to X school, and she wants to send him to that school. Who winds up not going to school? The son, because both have equal authority. Allah gave that authority to the man, not to abuse, not to become a dictator due to that, but because someone has to decide. However, her opinion, her input, her feelings, all of these he cannot ignore. So this is how Islam, if you look at every aspect of the woman's life, whether she's a mother or she's a daughter, we will deal with the daughter in a little bit, whether she's a wife, she has a status of that of a queen. Every woman in Islam has that particular status.
Okay, inshallah. Well, we're just gonna take a short break, inshallah. Join us, inshallah, after this short break.
A chance to gain reward I will spend on you, he says.
We can't just take knowledge and keep it as information. We have to transfer it into action. When he got up, he said one thing. Asalla nas? Did the people pray? In Hajj, for example, the primary example of how multiculturalism really looks like. All equal. I've got a dentist in Canada. Even though he's ripping holes in my teeth, he's got great akhlaq. I love visiting him. Identify the issue. Analyze it. Challenge it. And then try again. Because if you fail, big deal. Try again and keep trying.
If I think I lost my ablution, but I'm not sure, do I have to make wudu again? Is it allowed for Muslims to visit the graveyard, or is that shirk? Am I allowed to say Jummah Mubarak to someone? Can I get to know a sister before marriage? I have so many questions, and I feel that I've just reached a dead end. If only I could find someone trustworthy to answer my questions. Someone who speaks based on proof from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward I will spend on you, he says.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back.
Salam.
Just before the break, we just talked about we'd focus a lot on the mother and the woman in general, and we basically had to go, didn't we, for the break? So
Yes, sir. Yeah, I wanted to also highlight the position of the daughter in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ narrated and told the Sahaba, whoever amongst you has 3 daughters, whom he nurtures and looks after until they reach the age of puberty, and he does so by being patient with them during the times of the difficult times and the easy times, and he looks after them and maintains them, then he shall be from among the inhabitants of paradise. So our religion guarantees whoever has 3 daughters whom he raises Islamically. It's not just about having 3 daughters. They all become a model, an actress, and a singer. No. whom he looks after Islamically so that they become righteous women, and he's responsible for that, then they are his ticket to paradise. Now, someone may say, subhanallah, I don't have 3 daughters. One of the Sahaba, when the Prophet ﷺ said that, he said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, what if they're 2? If they're 2 daughters?" He said, even if they're 2. So, mashallah, the Sahaba, and rightfully, were greedy about this particular, greedy in general. One of them said, "What if it's only 1?" He said, even if it's only 1. So any one of us who has a daughter, and he raises her Islamically, and teaches her religion, and maintains her at these times, especially nowadays in these times of trials and tribulations and temptation everywhere, then she is his ticket to paradise. So as a wife, as a mother, first, she's guaranteed the utmost rights. As a wife, she's guaranteed respect and dignity and well-treatment on the part of her husband. She doesn't change her last name to his last name. In fact, it is among the most forbidden acts that a woman changes her last name to that of her husband's, because that may lead to the mixing of lineage at some point, and they may divorce, so now she has to keep his last name. Or does she change her last name back to her father's, then when she marries another man, she changes again? This is all un-Islamic. So everything remains hers. Her individuality is not compromised due to this marriage. As a daughter, we already heard the ahadith. As a sister, as an aunt, in any position she is, a woman in Islam is supposed to be taken care of. She is rarely ever expected to take care except when she is a mother of her children, because that's their rights. And as a wife, obviously she takes care of her husband, and the daughter to her father. Same. But other than that, from a financial point of view, she is not expected really to be paying anything. Even a wife, if she had her own job. And this is something that is quite significant in difference between the Islamic approach and the Western approach, for example. If a woman had a job in Islam, and she earns her own money, or she inherited money from her father, she does not have to give her husband a single penny, or dirham, or riyal, or whatever currency our audience use. Absolutely nothing. Whereas we find that in certain cultures, if she has a job, then she has to pay half the rent, and half of the groceries, and half of the car, and so on and so forth. And then, her having a job is basically making her equal to the man, even making her wear a suit and tie, go out, work like a man. Islam tells the woman, you're a queen, you relax. If you need to work, it is permissible within the guidelines of Islam. If you don't need to work, you relax, and you'll be taken care of.
SubhanAllah. Now, how do we kind of combat the classical misconceptions, like, let's start off about the hijab. The hijab is oppressing, and why do women have to cover, and the men doesn't have to cover as much, and why can't they do this, and being pure is in the heart.
Right.
You can be a good person. Does it mean, how do you counter these typical people?
Logic.
Many of the viewers, they may have come across these
Right.
doubts, or
Right.
they stumble on answering them when they're giving da'wah, or just they themselves wear hijab and they always ask this question, or
Right.
they themselves kind of think about wearing hijab, but the shaitan is giving them these kind of whisperings.
Right. Well, it's a very logical argument. It doesn't really take much to explain that anything which is valuable is often hidden by principle. You have a lot of money, you don't just put it on your balcony so that everyone driving by can see that you got plenty of money, because you'll be robbed the same day, not the next day. Yes.
Just going to hold you because we've got a phone call now. Brother Muhammad from Dubai. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing, brother?
Alhamdulillah. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I just want to make a contribution to the show.
Okay, mashallah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your efforts, you guys. You guys are doing a really great job. May Allah reward you all abundantly. And well, what I want to say is, honestly, the teachings of Islam are very, very beautiful. And I don't know, it's just should I say it's just that really not implementing the teachings correctly. Because honestly, if you have to look at whatever happens on the ground, does not reflect what the teachings say. Just look at the topic that you are discussing today. Honestly, when you have to look at what is happening in reality, it's the opposite. And if you have to look at the causes, it has nothing to do with the teachings or what. But what is dragging us back is those cultural issues. When you have to look at the issue of women, violence against women, mistreatment of women in societies, and more so, it hurts when this happen in Muslim communities. You know, I was some time back I read about in one of the Muslim countries, a man who was beaten up and stripped, a Muslim woman. And this a country that prouds itself of being a Muslim country. But when you look at things like this happening, honestly, being done by Muslims, you know, a mother being beaten and stripped in a community that is Islamic, how really does it, reflect? Yeah. So there is a lot. You look at forced marriages. These are things that Islam addressed 1400 years ago, but they're still prevalent. They're still prevalent in our communities. You know, Islam has beautiful teachings, but we really need to go back to this. You look at the problems of the world today.
Yes.
Be it financial, be it social, all these problems. When you have to sit back and really look at the beautiful teachings of Islam, and if you had to, sit back and say, well, why don't we go back to the teachings and correct everything? But you have all these pressures coming from a side. You have secularists saying, no, we cannot. We're not. In fact, I was looking at papers. There was a journalist. In fact, Muslims who are versed in the so-called Muslims that versed in should I call it the worldly education, not in the religious education. You find people saying, actually we don't need to go back 1400 years ago because those are taking us back. So we have these kinds of people among us who are actually against the Islamic teachings, propagating the narrative from the West that these teachings are incompatible with society today. Yet these are things that will really straighten our societies.
Yes, Jazakallah khair,
that's
brother.
all I wanted to contribute, and thanks so much.
Jazakallah khair for the input. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. So the brother, mashallah, had some very good points.
True.
That a lot of the time, and we'll once we finish talking about the hijab scenario, we will talk about one of the major cultural issues, which is the forced marriage, because that's also a very big misconception, especially with the non-Muslims thinking that Islam allows such things.
True.
So inshallah we'll finish off about the hijab and why the hijab and why should we have to wear it, and then inshallah we'll move on to that.
Sure.
We've got about 20 minutes left, inshallah. So
inshallah, Allah will facilitate. So as mentioned, whatever is valuable is hidden. You put money in the bank, hopefully it's a halal bank. You hide your diamonds if you have any. You hide your jewels, your jewelry. You don't put it out there because of its value. And the woman in Islam has a value. She is not a promotion to sell a car, or to sell candy bars, or to sell shaving razors, which is what we see in the advertisement today. Anytime an item they want to sell any item, they just put some woman who's half dressed to facilitate this particular sale. Even cars, they throw a woman with a bikini on a car on the hood. What is the relationship between the car and that woman? There's no relationship. But this is how a woman has been subjugated to or subjected to this kind of belittlement. Yes.
Or in a way, you could say there is the relation. They've made the relation that just like the man wants to own his flashy sports car, which he can cruise around in and ride around in,
Right.
and it's a toy for him, they are literally saying, you have a fancy sports car, you can also have one of these fancy women to play around with,
True.
have fun with,
True.
and when you've finished, get the new model. That's what they're basically
That's
saying. So
exact-
they
yes.
have
Subliminal messages.
dehumanized
Yes,
the
yes.
woman, that the woman is just a toy for your pleasure.
Exactly.
Nothing else.
And the only way you can resolve this issue is by giving this woman an identity other than the one that they're giving her. And this is exactly what Islam stipulated. Actually, it is in all religions, or at least the divinely revealed religions. If you really look into Judaism and Christianity, you will find the same references about the woman covering herself in their own scriptures. But from an Islamic point of view, it's the same thing. So the ideal way to resolve this issue is by the woman covering herself. And that covering creates a partition, a barrier between her and those who have evil tendencies, those who might divert from the righteous path. And so it becomes a sign of respect for the sisters. I say this for the sisters. Sister, this is a sign of honor and respect for you. You are distinguished from everyone else. Islam is not taking away your rights. Your right of beautifying yourself, remain. Your rights to be seen, remain, but with the right entity. It is only regulating them, which is what everything in life is about. It's about regulations, regulating them. Your husband, you have to dress up for him. You have to look beautiful before him. You have to, do whatever it takes so that there's that harmony between you and him. But the men in the street don't deserve any of that, because their appreciation to you is going to be merely a physical type of appreciation. It is not based on any deep-rooted respect or any kind of honor which they will have towards you. It's just going to be, taking advantage of your flesh. So the hijab is that sign of modesty that Allah has blessed the Muslim woman with, and due to that, we find that the rape, percentage in Muslim countries is much lower than other countries, because the women have the tendency to be covered, and that makes her less attractive in the sight of the rapist who's looking for flesh. He's going to find the woman who shows him the most, because in his mind he has the most guarantee of what he's going to get. Whereas if a sister were to be covered from top to bottom, he's still taking a risk. If he were to try to rape her, she may not be what he was looking for. So, in an indirect way, she's being protected from all of these things. So, the hijab is what makes the sister, the Muslim woman, stand out in this worldly life, and it is her ticket to paradise in the life to come.
SubhanAllah. Now, the brother mentioned forced marriages.
Right.
And that is something that always is popping up. We see it a lot. And unfortunately, there are forced marriages. I mean, we hear terrible stories of, for example, I'm from the UK, so there's many stories of British Asians from the Indian subcontinent where the daughters, she's grown up, even if she's practicing or non-practicing,
Right.
she's grown up with a certain understanding. It's not the same as the village back home where her parents came from.
Right.
And there's no real compatibility between other people. So they arrange for her, they said, we're going back for a family holiday. She arrives in that country, they force her to marry somebody, she's completely against it, she doesn't approve, she's forced, she's living a miserable life afterwards. What does Islam say about those? Are those acceptable marriages where she doesn't agree and she's forced to marry?
It's ludicrous. I mean, I wonder why the parents would do something like this to their own daughter. The cultural difference, her well-being. I mean, you've been looking after this girl ever since she was born, taking care of her, and now at that very age, that tender age, I would say, of where she's going to move out of the house, you do this to her by putting her with a stranger, complete stranger, whom she has not even gotten used to or to approve of. It may happen that they introduce her to someone from back home and they find this compatibility, alhamdulillah. But to force her into this marriage, according to some of the scholars, it's an invalid marriage. If she doesn't give the consent, it's an invalid marriage. So what type of lifestyle is she going to lead? What type of future is she going to have? What will happen to their grandchildren when they're born? So this is something that Islam does not allow, and this is where we always have this, like, the biggest conflict in the world is Islam versus culture. And very often, I would say 80%, there's a serious contradiction or conflict between the two. What you find Islam teaching is exactly the opposite of what the cultural tendencies are. And Muslims have to, as the brother mentioned, we have to stop referring to our cultural backgrounds which dictate what we do in Islam. We have to refer to the Quran and the Sunnah. And the Quran and the Sunnah do not say anything about, this kind of arranged marriage or this type of forced marriage. It does not endorse it, it does not support it, it's just not part of the process. And we have prophetic traditions about the necessity of the woman's approval and her guardian during the marriage contract. And her consent. So, culture has done some very evil things in this regard. And due to that, we hear about divorces, and we hear about broken families, and we hear about Muslim children being adopted by we don't know who. It's because of these types of arrangements which are not Islamic that Muslims continue to practice, some of which is the woman giving a dowry to the man, depending on his status. If he's a doctor, there's a price tag, and if he's an engineer, there's another price tag. I mean, seriously? Is this what is a purchase? It's a purchase of a man from a grocery store, and you pay according to his qualifications. The woman paying the dowry. All these are cultural practices that have crept in, and because of us Muslims entertaining them, they continue to create disasters in the Muslim societies and Muslim communities. The solution is simple. Go back to our revelation. You can never go wrong. You can never go wrong by referring to what the Quran said, what the Prophet ﷺ said. You can go wrong if you refer to what my grandfather did back home, or what our culture stipulates. And this is the fine line between guidance and misguidance very often.
I mean, just as we're talking about forced marriage, something else that kind of came to mind was, which we often, all around the world, but it's come up in the West as well, because some of the Muslims who have come from other parts of the world have done this, is this whole honor killing. The girl, she's brought up in the UK, many a time the parents don't bring her up particularly religiously, but
Right.
she's still expected to be so religious in certain aspects, but she's brought up to be very, what they may consider to be very free and liberal, and
In other aspects.
so she falls in love with a non-Muslim, and they elope, and the family found out, and then the family go and kill her or strangle her and all kinds of crazy things. So do we have anything in Islam called honor killing? Does Islam ever allow, even if a very religious family finds out that their daughter has slept with somebody else or has a boyfriend who has committed a sin like this, can the father or any of the family members take this girl and beat her black and blue, torture her, or ultimately do an honor killing?
Wow. If we were to ask this question to 10 reverts who have basic understanding of Islamic principles, I'm not talking about scholars who are graduated from universities or who have studied under the mashayikh all their lives and know the principles of fiqh and the usul of tafsir. Anyone who has the basic fundamental understanding of Islam should be able to answer you on the spot that this is something that cannot possibly be endorsed by the religion. Now, we're not for dating and the whole 9 yards and going outside of that marriage, the marriage contract, which is fundamental in Islam. Yet, if a person were to go beyond that, then the Islamic reaction to this has its own set of principles. Surely killing or harming physically is not one of them. And what we need to do, what parents need to do, is first look at what you have done that led to this. Very often, as you mentioned, Brother Ismail, the parents had allowed things to get so bad that they reached that point. And now they want a quick fix. And a quick fix has to be on the expense of taking the soul of this young girl, who is simply a byproduct of their upbringing, the way they raised her all their lives. But let's assume that they're regretful about how they raised her. She was living this loose, free life, and then she found a boyfriend, she wound up dating him, and so on and so forth, they found out. How is that going to be allowed to take the soul of a believer? And this is really the fine line. And this is where Islam, we know from a hadith that the Kaaba, which Muslims all over the world are eager to see, let alone visit, for that to be destroyed stone by stone is lighter in the sight of Allah than spilling the blood of one believer. So to take away the soul of a believer due to this, and this is something that Islam did not stipulate in the penal code. We do have a penal code, and there are punishments for certain acts, grave acts we would say. If the person were to be in an Islamic country where the Islamic law is being applied. Not that we go to somewhere in Canada, somewhere, and then we say we're going to apply it in our own way. We have to be realistic. Then there are consequences for certain acts. But nowhere you find in Islam that a father has the right to do this to his daughter because of her committing that sin. And when they say that she's dating someone, even if it were to be zina, did they prove that it was zina? We all know that there need to be 4 witnesses to see the act. If that didn't happen, they cannot make that assumption. And even if they did, they don't have the right to take her life in this manner.
SubhanAllah, that reminds me, the scholars have said, that the fact that, when we know the stories of the woman who came to Prophet ﷺ and she said that I'm pregnant, she said that I've cheated, I've committed adultery,
right.
Please, give me the punishment,
yeah.
Purify me. And we know that he told her to go away. He basically did his best to say to don't confess to me, just
right.
As if he's almost saying, leave it between you and Allah, don't
and repent to Allah.
And repent to
yes,
Allah,
Yes.
But we know the end. That's a very common story. But we know that if you look through the fact that it's 4 witnesses, to my knowledge, and I'm going to take a phone call in a minute, but just finish this point. To my knowledge, until this day, there have never been an actual recorded case of where a woman was given the punishment, or a man, of adultery based upon the account of 4 witnesses.
Yes.
So it's very, very difficult to prove and therefore to implement. But we'll take a phone call. I believe it's Brother Mustafa. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I have a question, and I know lots of the viewers also have this question, and that is why all of the networks in the world, it doesn't matter, all of the social media in the world speak about ISIL and say all of the news about it's for people, give information about their belief, their thoughts, their ideas.
Okay, so I didn't quite understand. What was the actual question? Hello? Assalamu alaikum. I think we've lost Brother Mustafa.
I didn't get it either. I missed a couple of words, I think, which were key to understand what he was trying to...
I think he was saying there was different networks and different social media. They talk about various beliefs, but then he got cut off, so it wasn't quite sure what he really was getting to. So maybe he'll call back, inshallah. We have only 3 or 4 minutes left of the show. So I slipped my mind. What were we talking about before the phone call came in?
We were discussing the idea
the fact
of the honor
that
killing.
Even the 4 witnesses is something very difficult to prove. So it's almost, you could say, even though it's also a very, these punishments are very, you could say, difficult to prove. Therefore, not very often implemented anyway. And it's not like we see now.
They're deterrents.
It's not like we see now in so-called people who are going around and claiming that they have their own Islamic countries and claiming that they're the ultimate Islamic rulers, and they willy-nilly, this person has been found guilty of fornication, let's stone them.
Right.
And we see the videos on the implementing Islam, how they feel, and we're pretty sure that there were no 4 witnesses there. So there's a big difference between what Islam says and what many people, like we say, do in the name of Islam, whether it's saying that they are the ultimate, that they are the true Islamic country, or whether this one is the ultimate ruler, and all the acts we see people doing, we don't need to mention them. We see recent ones in Europe, all over the place, people committing certain acts in the name of Islam, taking it upon themselves to do these acts, are very far from Islam most of the time. But they give Islam a very bad name.
By all means, the issue is that these are, while they appear to the average person that they're intellectual, or they're based on their intellect or their sincerity towards practice Islam. The truth is very, not always, not sometimes, always it's based on ignorance. It's when any time a Muslim focuses on one aspect of the religion while ignoring other aspects of the religion, he can fall into this form of extremism. That's how extremism happens. When you take one part of the religion, which is valid, but you make it the core focus, while turning a blind eye towards other matters of the religion which complete that whole picture. I'm not talking about someone being very interested in Tawheed, for example, and not knowing fiqh. No, I mean when you talk about the matters wherein it involves the livelihood of people, the rights of people, the blood of people, these issues, you have to have a comprehensive understanding of Islam, the rulership in Islam, the leadership in Islam, the khilafah, and so many things have to be understood well, because if you take only one part of them and you ignore the others, you find someone in nowhere land telling you that we have made our own state and we're implementing our own law, and very often they're ignoring certain things from Islamic teachings that Allah Azza wa Jal through His wisdom revealed, which the Prophet ﷺ understood and applied, and so did the Sahaba and those who followed them. So this, to conclude, this will put this obligation on us, Muslims, and all our brothers and sisters, that we have to change this image that the people have, this negative image that is being made against Islam. And it is by learning, it is by authentic knowledge. And this authentic knowledge is what will get rid and dispel these misconceptions. So the sister has to be able to explain herself before other women that I am not oppressed. No one put a gun to my head and told me, cover your head. This is something that I willingly do, seeking Allah's pleasure. And the men have to understand what Islam teaches and explain that this woman is doing this out of her own will. And this is a freedom Allah gave her. We actually freed her, liberated her from this oppression that she has been put into. While others claim that they have liberated her, while in fact they are imprisoning her in their own world, so that she's taken advantage of.
Well, we've come to the end of the show. I do believe that Brother Mustafa tried to call back, but we're literally at the end of the show now.
Sorry, Brother Mustafa.
So we'd hope, inshallah, that Brother Mustafa can call back at the same time next week, and we'll be more than happy to see what he had to say. And Jazakallah khair for coming on the show, of course.
Shukran.
And hopefully we can have you when you're passing through Dubai again.
Inshallah.
And inshallah, join us inshallah here Huda TV, live from Dubai, same time, same place, inshallah, next week. Next week, inshallah, should be Brother Gabriel back in the hot seat, as they say. Until then, we leave you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, He says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn His reward. Don't forget the